I turn on the record button. Okay. So I'll just start by introducing myself and kind of go over a bit of the kind of agenda for our time together. My name is Sarah Arthurs. I'm a member of Hillhurst United Church in Calgary. I've also been involved with launching New Scoop YYC, which is a media platform that does a form of journalism called generative journalism. Generative journalism is based on appreciative inquiry and asset-based community development. If that means anything to anybody. And it's about, it does? Margaret, you're familiar with it? Great. So our tagline is creating the world we want through the stories we tell. And EDGE has been kind of supportive of our work and explorations here. And as one of the things we've discovered is using this particular online platform as a way to gather people and surface stories and share them. And when we approached EDGE with that, they were really excited as a way to use this tool to connect groups across Canada that they're aware of who are maybe not aware of each other that are doing really cool things in different kind of playgrounds. And so they wanted to use this as a way to do that. So that's what we're experimenting with here. So it's kind of in the innovation zone, and towards that end, would really appreciate it if you would complete a survey at the end of our call to give us feedback about how it's working, other topics, what might make it better, what you really enjoyed. That kind of feedback would be really helpful. So we've kind of gone through the technology guideposts, so you're kind of familiar with how this operates, and you've all made it here, so congratulations. That's great. For some of us, kind of climbing the technological Everest is always, you know, job well done when we get there. So in terms of our time together, we'll be kind of organized around introductions. So everybody will have a chance to introduce themselves and share kind of what brought them on this call. And then we'll kind of go into more details with our kind of topic guides, who for today are Christine, Hannah, and Margaret. And Tim, were you also part of that group that was invited to be a topic guide? I can't remember.
Yes, I was.
Okay, thank you. I don't think I heard back from you, so I wasn't, Is that, whatever. It's a work in progress. I'm glad you're here. It's all fabulous. So what we'll do is we'll just do introductions all the way around, and then we'll spend some time exploring kind of what you're doing, what you're on the cusp of, what's kind of new and exciting in the work that you're doing, and then we'll just have a conversation with each other about what we're learning, what's going on. So I wonder, let's see, Hannah, if you would be willing to go first and introduce yourself, and so at this point we'll just do really short introductions, just who you are, the work you're doing, and maybe how you came to be doing that work, and then we'll go into more fulsome conversation after that.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm coming from Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I'm representing an organization called One Just City. I'm the fund developer for that organization. And One Just City came together in 2015 by 4 member charities or outreach ministries. They came together and decided to pool their resources to hire one full-time fund developer to do grant writing and organizing on their behalf, because they were finding that they were coming into competition a lot for resources and granting opportunities. So that's how One Just City came, and basically these outreach sites are working every day in our city, providing basic necessities for people that are experiencing temporary or prolonged poverty, living on the streets, living with mental illness, and whatever else they're coming from. We're a place where they can come to find food, to find toiletries, clean undergarments, but also to find community and a sense of belonging through our over 40 different programs and stuff like that. So I actually am just on a term position with One Just City. The fund developer that's been with them since the start just went on a 6-month leave, but she's coming back at the end of October. And how I got involved was through my university program. I wrote my honors thesis on one of these outreach sites and on their ability to repurpose food that is being unnecessarily wasted and providing it to people that need it in our city. And then this job opportunity came up and I applied, and I was lucky enough to spend the last 6 months working, writing grants and doing cool stuff like this. So that's where I'm coming from.
Great. And Hannah, perhaps, and what is the connection with the United Church or with Edge? Are you aware of kind of that kind of network?
So our ministries are all, One Just City was formed by Winnipeg Presbytery. So that's of the United Church of Canada. And each of our outreach ministries are a United Church ministry as well. So that's the connection there.
Okay. So it's all right. Great. Thank you. Okay, Christine, would you like to go next? And you need to unmute yourself.
There we go. Hello.
Hi, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Good. I'm Christine Smaller. I'm a United Church minister, and I'm serving a congregation in Scarborough, Ontario. And I initially went to this congregation 2.5 years ago on a supply position to help them do some visioning and perhaps some revitalization. And I actually used appreciative inquiry for about 7 months through workshops and preaching, various ways. And so when we looked at what we could do and what was needed, it became very evident quickly that in our area of Scarborough, and actually we found out in all of Scarborough, there were no services available for LGBTQ youth. Absolutely none, which was a shock to me. When my congregants first told me this, I confess that I actually didn't believe them. And, as the Holy Spirit works, I ended up getting connected with someone from Planned Parenthood who had just completed a comprehensive analysis of both services and needs and actually wants from LGBTQ youth. So we embarked on meeting that need in a collaborative way, and it's been a very interesting couple of years, but we're up and running, and it's really been, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, Tim, what if you could introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I am the manager of program coordination and community engagement here at Metropolitan. Metropolitan, as I mentioned earlier, we're located in downtown Toronto in the heart of the city, and Metropolitan, we're going to be celebrating our 200th anniversary this coming year in 2018. It's one of the first Methodist church in Canada, and actually the first one was on Six Nations territory here in Ontario, but that's another story. But my role here is I oversee our community services programs, our housing program. I'm also responsible for raising money, for different initiatives. And my role was a result of the United Church. This Metropolitan has spent 4 years doing a visioning process, and out of that, they created a vision, and you could say a document, which highlighted a new structure and a new scope of how the ministry was going to unfold for the next few years. And so the church restructured itself under that visioning. We have 4 pillars that are responsible for different areas, and I focus with the outreach committee, which is one of the pillars, but also with our music, our creative and visual arts committee. And so a lot of before coming to Metropolitan, I spent about 17 years working in social services in Toronto, primarily with homelessness and vulnerable people, running drop-ins and shelters here in the city. And so coming into this role was sort of a revisit back to my younger days after graduating from Bible college. And Christine, you appreciate this, is that when I first came to the city, it was actually at the invite of the elders from the Indigenous community to come and work with the youth in Scarborough.
Wow.
At Gabriel Dumont, and I worked out of the Boys and Girls Club there, and I literally, my introduction to Boys and Girls Club was, I want to start a youth program with the youth, will you hire me? And they said, give us a 3-month plan, and I did that, and then they hired me. So that was my introduction to the city, and then been ongoing since. And so as a result, one of my pieces of being here in Metropolitan is overseeing, sort of supporting our Truth and Reconciliation Committee and how we respond to the calls of action, also to UNDRIP, and sort of really create the awareness and knowledge around that, and looking internally. And of course, Metropolitan has very deep Methodist roots and very deep pieces in that, and what that, and of course the Methodist Church was very much involved in this particular church, in particular with Edgerton Ryerson being here. There's a unique history here. So
for those who don't know what that is, Tim, maybe you could share that.
The TRC? No.
The unique history you referenced.
Oh, so Metropolitan not only is the mother church of United Church of Canada. United Church was formed here, but prior to that, it was the head Methodist Church of Canada. And so Edgerton Ryerson was not only a minister and mayor of Toronto, but he was also the president of the Methodist Church. And as part of that role, he was involved in the formation, as superintendent of education, he was involved in the formation of the Indian Act, which included the residential school system.
Wow. So, okay, yeah. let's kind of loop back a little bit there, so I can follow this. So you're saying, now what was his name again? How do you spell that? Edgerton
Ryerson, or Egerton. People say it a different way, but it's Egerton, Ryerson.
And is that like Ryerson University as well?
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Okay,
so Ryerson, who formed the modern education system.
Wow. So he was the mayor of Toronto. He was, now what was his role with the church?
Not only was he a minister, but he also formed Victoria College, which was the first college in Canada to train ministers, which is now Emmanuel College today.
Okay. And then he was involved with the education system?
He was the superintendent of education for Upper Canada.
And he was involved with the Indian Act?
Right in the residential school piece of the Indian Act, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay, and so when was this? I should know this, but I don't, so.
Well, Edgerton passed away in 1878. He retired as superintendent in 1876. But after the 1867 formation of Canada, the British North American Act, they were very much involved with the other 3 or 4 gentlemen who put together that piece of the document.
And so when was that document written?
Pretty much right after the B&A was done. Because
1868 or something in there?
Well, no, it was written and adopted. It was adopted in 1872, but it had been ongoing from right away, because the number one issue, of course, at the time was not only trying to connect Canada from coast to coast, but the second issue is how to deal with Indian people, as they called it.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, that's all, anyway, very interesting. Thank you. Well, I'm glad we've got more time. This is going to be a wonderful morning. Okay, Margaret, please introduce yourself and the work that you're connected with and how you came to be involved with it.
Hi, my name is Margaret Moan. I also have a spirit name, so I'm Thundering Eagle Woman. I'm a minister of the Presbyterian Church in Canada, and I also am a wisdom carrier for Anishinaabe. So I'm an Anishinaabe Kwe and an Irish. So mostly I just call myself OG Irish. I'm a minister of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. That's how I wound up being here at Winnipeg Inner City Missions. I got called here in 1999. So I've been doing this work for 18 years come this fall. It's missions with an S because it was 2 missions. It was Anishinaabe Fellowship Center, which worked with Indigenous people who were coming down from the north to help them integrate into the city life. And then at Flora House, it was a children's ministry, mostly with Indigenous kids living in the north end of Winnipeg, and providing a safe place for them to be after school and helping them to stay in school and away from the gangs and prostitution that happen in the north end. Currently, so those two missions in 2004, we amalgamated and became Winnipeg Inner City Missions, and then we built what is now called Missionary Place of Hope, and it is a First Steps to Employment project for adults aged 30 to 50, and they have to have been long-term unemployed or underemployed, have maintained sobriety if that's ever been an issue for at least a year before they're eligible for the project. And what we do is just work individually with 19 people. It's a housing first project, so we put the house up so that people would have clean, safe, sober accommodation while they're trying to work from this unemployment through to being employed and finding their own way after they leave from here. So there's three things that we do. So there's the First Steps to Employment project and the housing. We have an outreach ministry at Anishinaabe Fellowship Center for the community, and we have a children's program that starts with age 0, like infant, up to age 14. So that's the age group that we're concentrating on. And then we have a church. So the Place of Hope Presbyterian Church was established in 2014 in November. So basically, I'm a full-time minister and a full-time executive director for the mission.
Two full-time jobs. Sorry?
Yeah, two full-time jobs, yes.
Okay.
So it's a little tiring. And we're looking forward to being able to find the funding so that we can have an executive director and a minister. And so we're hoping that will happen in the next couple of years, but we're just working towards that at the moment. Basically working with Indigenous people living in deep poverty in the inner city of Winnipeg.
Okay. And what was your connection with the Edge or with Carla?
So through the Presbyterian Church in Canada, we have connected with Edge, like they provide us with this kind of resource. So that's how I got here.
Okay, great. Okay, so Hannah, I'd like to come back to you and maybe just dive a little deeper. Would want kind of and hopefully you'll be able to speak to this because you've been part of this project now for 6 months, you were saying, I think. And so what do you think the folks that have decided to come together, what has been the benefit of that partnership? What kinds of things have you seen that have kind of become possible that perhaps weren't possible before?
Well, there's quite a few benefits. First of all, just sharing resources and knowledge and even staff. We've been able to hire a community capacity builder, which is, she organizes our community volunteers because 2 of our sites, we operate mainly off of volunteers at all of our sites, but 2 of them have a lot of volunteers that are also accessing our services. And so they need additional supports in, encouragement and just more guidance in their day-to-day volunteering. So we were able to hire 1 full-time staff member that is shared between 2 sites. And that just wouldn't have been possible if they weren't, pooling those resources and coming together in this way. Beyond that, it's really just been amazing to see, to kind of synthesize our common vision and mission, and in promoting the work that we're doing, because a lot of these ministries are kind of going unheard of in Winnipeg. And after coming together, we were able to, like the fund developer, this position is also in charge of communications and in reaching out and spending time building their presence in the community, because a lot of times, even within their own congregations, the work that they're doing is relatively unheard of. So it's just been really great in promoting the work that we're doing and building our support base, and then just resource sharing.
Right.
It's been really
Cool. From the work that I've done, I often hear that there is this sense that it would be good for organizations to come together and to partner and to benefit from that cooperative approach. But often it seems like that's a real challenge. So I wonder if you know what enabled them to kind of make that choice and be willing to take that risk and probably to let go of some things in order for this to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there in the beginning, so I can't really speak to what was going on right when it all kind of happened and who exactly the main players are. But I think like really dedicated board members is something that is super, super important, and just the willingness to come together on a monthly basis and work out the kinks. And I think up into this point, so this year is kind of interesting because we have just incorporated One Just City. So we are now looking to actually bring the member charities, which are their own entities, but part of One Just City, under the One Just City name. So I think moving forward, it's going to be even more of a challenge in kind of synthesizing everything and coming together in new ways, because up until this point, they've been relatively independent in the work that they do. And One Just City has just been a way for them to basically give the staff on site more time with the people who are in crises and who need them there, but without sacrificing fund development. So that's been like really the main focus up to this point. But moving forward, they're going to be looking to kind of bring everything together and to unify our financials and our best practices and everything. So it's going to be a really interesting couple of years coming up, and we're just kind of on the cusp of that right now. Like it's not, there's a lot of challenges and a lot of meetings ahead, and we're excited and hopeful, but it's kind of, we're just synthesizing in that way now. I think up to this point, they've been able to come together and share the fund developer, and the money that One Just City raised is distributed equally across all of our sites. So it was kind of a no-brainer up until this point. Well, I'm not to diminish the work that they've done, because it's been huge, but now is when like the real work is going to start.
Rubber hits the road in some way. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hannah. Christine, I wonder if you could share a bit more about your experience in Scarborough. And of course, I connected with the appreciative inquiry piece, and was really interested about that, and share a bit more about kind of when your congregation was in that process. What did they learn about themselves that they didn't know kind of before they embarked on that?
On the appreciative inquiry?
Yeah.
So this is an incredible congregation, very, very small. So we have maybe 30 people out on a Sunday. And just to give you some idea of this project, we've already raised $160,000 and hired a part-time, we call her a program director, but essentially an executive director for Toby's Place. That is a once-a-week drop-in, as well as a community outreach. So when they had gone through 2 or 3 ministers in not a short amount of time, but too quickly for the congregation. Congregation was getting very tired. They were looking to call someone. And I came in as a supply person and just asked them, for I think it was for 9 months, and just asked them what they wanted to do. And they wanted to do some visioning. So I explained that I had had very good success with appreciative inquiry, especially in a community organization that was feeling a little tired, on the brink of despair.
I'm just going to interrupt for a sec. Would other people like a very brief kind of introduction to what appreciative inquiry is? Do you guys know what that is? Pardon?
As I would. I don't even know what you're
Sure.
talking about.
Okay, well let me share that with you then. So appreciative. So it's an organizational theory and method to do basically an analysis of any type of organization and to come up with some goals and then strategies to achieve those goals. And the first part, of course, of any analysis of an organization is to see what their strengths and weaknesses are. So in the church, in many nonprofit organizations, the members can become really, the burden of being told what they can't do every time there's some sort of assessment, where they go through that there's not enough money, there's not enough expertise, there's not enough people to do the things that need. So appreciative inquiry, which actually started in the corporate world, that was my introduction to it in a for-profit environment. It comes from a different approach, and when we applied in the church context, it's the theological theme is that God has given us everything that we need to answer God's call in this place. So it already starts from a place of abundance, and the assessment method is to start to ask questions of the congregation. And the questions are initially to look for what is going well, because every organization has something that's going really well that they're really good at. So from the beginning of the process, it starts to change the conversation, which then helps to shift the culture to both being more hopeful and positive and also being more open-minded about what they can do. So it can be very simple. You can get a group of people together and say, what goes well here. So we did that. I had a strategy to roll that out on a variety of levels, and it became apparent that they were just really great at hospitality. They were really great at being open-minded. They were good at hard work. They had some good space that they could use. And then we started to ask ourselves, with these strengths, what could it be that God is calling us to in this community? And that's where people started to talk about how there was a complete lack of services, a huge gap in services for this particular population. And so we started to ask what the community needed and sort of match that with what we could do. And this idea of this drop-in evolved. Yeah, and I want to say too that I love Hannah's description of how these groups came together. We found initially that we didn't face objections to it because we're in a small sort of blue-collar residential area. But we didn't receive any help. Like the church, until I got connected to Carla, we didn't get any help from the church, like from the presbytery or the conference, anything like that. I went and visited, the politicians in the area, other churches, organizations. They weren't, the politicians were intrigued but not interested in supporting it. And of course, the other community organizations were tapped. I mean, they were just doing the best that they could. So it was the first year was really tough because we knew that this was so needed and we just couldn't get traction in the United Church itself to help us. So
what helped you to get traction?
Well, we just did it ourselves, honestly. And we had, I have a background of community organizing and grant writing, that kind of thing. We had, through the appreciative inquiry, we found out that we had legal resources in the community, grant writing resources, planning, HR, all that kind of thing. And we realized that we kind of would have to do it ourselves. And even then, we had a huge, devastating, really, roadblock because we had applied for a grant, a seed money of $25,000. Verbally, we've been told that we would get it, and at the last minute, which was several months later, we were told that we were no longer eligible, that the policy guidelines had changed. So it wasn't just that we weren't getting help, it was also that we just felt, the community felt that they just felt very alone. they felt very alone. And so because of the appreciative inquiry and the culture had shifted in the congregation significantly, like the congregants would say that it shifted from sort of negative, low energy to more positive with energy. We were able to sort of withstand that, but it was tough. It was tough. And then once we got going, then a lot of people wanted to get on the bandwagon. A lot of people. We ended up having a fundraiser with, big comedy names, like Robin Duke from Second City and like a number of others. And so it's been fascinating. But we've tried to just keep our eyes on the prize of it being this program that is participant-centered and is, not stretched by these sort of new stakeholders who are interested in being involved in such a project. We've encouraged them to do their own, to do their own things and ensure that there's services in other areas of Scarborough.
Great. Okay. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Christine at this point? Or any resonances, things that kind of connect for you? Okay.
Well, the only thing I would say is, because we work in the same city here, I'm kind of surprised by the lack of enthusiasm, you could say, for the first year. Metropolitan was one of the first affirming congregations, and we're very much connected with the Church Street community, and so we have a very strong connection to that community here. And then of course, because of our widespread congregation throughout the city, I know your city councilors out there very well, and particularly in Ainsley, he's been eager to push something like this in Scarborough for many years.
Yeah.
So, I'm a little surprised by the lack of enthusiasm on that end of things. So,
yeah, I was surprised. I'd like to respond to that because I think that probably you and I represent the very ends of the spectrum of United Churches in the country as well as in Toronto. So I'm representing a very small church, maybe 80 on the rolls. We have no money. I'm part-time. We do everything ourselves. We have, there's a couple of United Churches that have much more profile on either side of us, quite close. And we don't have I don't have a profile in presbytery or conference. I was told by presbytery when I came in that the church was going to close in 3 years, so there really wasn't much point in doing much with it. Clearly you're in a very different position, right?
Yes.
It's so great the resources that you have that you have at your disposal, like all sorts of wonderful resources. So I'm like 25 hours a week. I've got an elderly congregation. The pastoral care needs are quite significant. I'm trying to revitalize worship and grow the congregation, and spent 18 months trying to get this started. So I would have been surprised. Like initially I was surprised, but now I realize the reasons why it's not surprising at all. And as I've connected to other tiny churches, I've realized that there's really wonderful things going on in those tiny churches that is not on the radar of the church governance. And, it's about connections. To be frank, it's about money.
Oh, yeah.
It's about who your congregants are. Do you know what I mean? Like the counselors are the politicians, like Bill Blair is our MP. I went and talked to him. Like they're very interested, and we've pushed and pushed and pushed in the media to show that they have got to deal with this gap in services. So it's starting to come along. But Bill Blair doesn't care about my 30 older congregants who are poor. No. Right? But he'll listen to you. I'm sure that you could get a meeting with him. So it's a very different. So I guess what I'm saying is, it's actually in hindsight, it's not surprising at all that we weren't given much companionship, which is actually really what we were looking for. We were just looking for you know, someone to befriend us and walk with us and tell us, good job, keep going, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm kind of was also surprised is because I've been involved with some of the smaller initiatives that have taken place in the West End, Davenport area, and they were grassroots. They were like just couples or just a few people who got together and said, we need something in our neighborhood, and they were able to pull it together within a few weeks or months.
Yeah, and actually, sorry.
It depends on, it goes back to, it depends on your connections and sort of the path you're trying to take. And the metropolitan is very large, and but it's also got a history, which gives it way more than what it has in capacity. And so,
absolutely.
You know, and this is, you know, looking at, you know, it's over to 200 years, some of the larger shelters, programs, basic needs services have come out of metropolitan.
Oh, it's such a great resource. Absolutely. But I just want to respond to one thing, because I think that this is where things get muddled and confused, and where the church can actually hinder small startups, grassroots startups.
Yes.
Because when we first envisioned this, you know, my reaction was, well, we'll just buy some cookies and juice and put some chairs out on Monday, put some flyers out in the neighborhood, right? And and then, you know, as I started to say that, someone said, oh no, the United Church has so much money now to be doing these things. We can get you some money. And what happened was, I mean, this is such a cautionary tale. Like, someone came in and said to us, don't start anything, because if you start anything, you won't be entitled for the seed money. So you need to just wait until we get you the money. So, I mean, we did work, like we did lots of work, like policy development and all sorts of stuff, community connections. But we didn't start, and then we didn't get the money. So I agree, like my initial response was, this just needs to be a grassroots thing. Let's just do it. That's, you know, my experiences from Parkdale, right? So like you just do it, you buy some juice. So that's where I think there was this weird dynamic where the church resources actually hindered this grassroots thing. Now, speaking as we are now, it's been an enormous help, and I'm so grateful to Edge, so grateful to Carla for seeing the possibilities, and indeed we have been able to raise this money and really formalize the program in a different way than I had initially envisioned.
I'm going to just pause for a minute, and I'm loving this conversation. It's rich, and you're both being kind of present and speaking from your hearts and your minds about this complex issue, and it's great. Thank you very much. Tim, I want to come back to you, because I was really struck by your sharing of the connection of your church with the whole. You know, it's hard to be around for 200 years and not have, you know, all kinds of things as part of your story. So I'm just wondering, in terms of that kind of interesting connection with the Indian Act, and then now the TRC, and as you're moving ahead, how is that, like, what's on the horizon for your faith community that's kind of in that zone that's new and it's kind of exciting or risky or stepping out?
You know, I think before I answer that question, I think, you know, one of the, to go back, I think it's important to acknowledge sort of the environment that I work in, and that is the level of leadership that this church has always played a role in the city, both as Methodist and now as United Church, has really given a lot of access and a lot of influence in policy in different areas of the city over the years, and still does, and also within the national church. And, you know, some of it makes the news and some of it doesn't. For those of you in Toronto, you know what I'm talking about. But some of the, you know, when we look at, with that in mind, what I refer to as the mantle of leadership that's here, the mantle of leadership is based on very much on the history of this faith community. And so when you start looking at how the activities of what's happened, 200 years ago to today, you start talking about white supremacy and white framework, a lot of things are enshrined in the very basic ceremonies and the very basic elements of the church, even in perception. I had an experience here not too long ago where one of our more former prominent members of congregation passed away. And when she was a member at the church, she was very involved in a lot of different things, really kicked up a lot of early work around developing relationship with Indigenous people in Toronto and downtown. And then she actually met somebody and married him and lived on reserve and became a member of that particular committee and was a huge advocate, was always in the news. And so when her funeral was here, there was 2 funerals. There was a 4-day service that was on the land in which she lived up north. But then here in the city, we had one for the non-Indigenous people, you could say. But we still had Indigenous people come in. I had a couple of drummers come in. And I remember at one point, one of the drummers, the way our sanctuary is set up, we got, we have doors on either side of our, like most setups, but there's doors going up in behind the sanctuary, in behind the front. On the one side there's a water fountain behind. So she went in up while the service was going on. She went up, got a drink of water, and sat back down. And then all I heard as one of the biggest criticisms was how that small act was seen as disturbance to the sanctity of the sanctuary. And it's funny because when we went through the visioning process, which is through the similar scenario that Christine went through, the appreciative inquiry, we did the exact same way. And one of the things they always self-identified, the congregation, was how liberal and open-minded they were.
How
liberal and open-minded they were, right? Because that's who you are as a United Church member. But when you start challenging the core aspects of worship and what that means in a framework, suddenly it was, we're disturbing the sanctity of the sanctuary. And of course, my response to them was, the sanctity of the sanctuary was built on the sacredness of our Indigenous land. And that sort of killed the conversation from there. But it's just one of those things where we look at the little things that are ingrained in not only in colonial structure, but in the institutions as old as ours in Methodist, Presbyterian, United churches. They're built in the very basic elements of our foundation, and having to have the conversations, looking at and reviewing those things, it's a very, very difficult process.
So you're almost, I'll use this word, although I don't think I actually know what it means, but you're almost decolonizing the kind of the church and the internal kind of processes of how the church is being. Does that fit at all?
Well, I would say colonization is built on the backs of our religious institutions. And the reality is Methodism, Presbyterianism coming from England is very much part of the infrastructure of how the colonial world was built here in Canada. Mm-hmm. So it's going deeper than decolonizing. It's going to the very core values and principles and which affects worship and ceremony. So, that's very, very important to understand. And so when we talk about millennials trying to connect to the church, what does that mean today? That's a bit of a tangent.
Well, I think the piece that I'm seeing the connection with, Tim, and what you're saying is our topic today is embracing our urban identity. And, what we do know is that in most of our big cities, there is a high population of Indigenous people that live there. So you have this kind of bringing together of usually the oldest churches in the city are in the downtown, and then you have the kind of the Indigenous community and group that are there, and then how does all this, you know, it kind of it's a very creative possibility, but also lots of tension, I imagine, there. So it's a really interesting kind of topic and conversation that you
there is.
And I want to make sure we have time for Margaret to share a bit more about her work. So I'll let you kind of have the last word here, and then we'll move on to spend some time with some more of what Margaret's doing. Go ahead, Tim. You can have the last word.
Sorry. Yeah, the only thing is you know, because this work has also taught me to the national office. I've been working with the executive ministries, and for many of you, you don't know this, is that the remit process the United Church has been going through has intentionally excluded the Indigenous ministries from across Canada, and we've been going through our own sort of remit process. And one of the pieces, and I've been included part of this process as an urban Indigenous representative. And in this discussion, one of the things I have presented forward, which is going to the recall of 42 Council next week, is that urban centers are built on unceded territories of First Nations people. And so from that perspective, our relationship and how we first learned about the Creator was through the land. Christianity came later. How we learned about the Creator and His love for us was initially through the land and the medicines that it offers to us. And in that, looking at what that means today is that we have a bigger responsibility now as mainline, you know, not only as churches and ministries, but we have a responsibility to look at how we sort of remove the barriers around us. I mean, just looking at reserves, that's a colonial barrier. And what that means for Indigenous rights, that's another barrier. And so, and the church thrives in those barriers. And so when we talk about land ownership and land recognition, land involvement, it's a very big conversation that is beginning, we're having on a national level.
Wow. Fascinating. Thank you so much, Tim. Really interesting. Margaret, I'm sure you've had all kinds of things provoked and responses and thoughts, as well as we want to hear more about your own story. So what's top of mind for you at this point in the conversation?
The whole thing, healing and reconciliation between Indigenous peoples and the church. That's what we have been focusing on here at Winnipeg Inner City Missions for at least 15 years now. And as far as Indigenous congregations within the Presbyterian Church in Canada, there are only two of us. One is a reserve in Mistawassa, Saskatchewan, and then the congregation that we just got established here in Winnipeg. So 2 Indigenous congregations in the entire Presbyterian Church in Canada leaves us in a very difficult place. The church talks about healing and reconciliation. I'm also the chairperson of our National Native Ministries Council. Just the structures of the church are really difficult to wend your way through. Our funding mostly comes through Canadian ministries, and all of the work of healing and reconciliation happens through Justice Ministries. So that's like a different arm of the church. And Justice Ministries has hardly ever consulted with the National Native Ministries Council when it comes to anything that it's doing as the Presbyterian Church in Canada around healing and reconciliation with Indigenous people. So yeah, it's been a long journey. It's a tough place to be, and I love it. I mean, I just got a chance to do a tour, a deputation tour within the Presbyterian Church. So I was in Pickering, Ontario, Acton, Ontario, Murray Harbour, Prince Edward Island, and Chatham, New Brunswick, all within the last 2 weeks. And and the church is open. You know, the invite comes. Unfortunately, I'm one of those people who, like, I am the executive director of this missions, the three of them, and the minister of the congregation, and so I don't have a whole lot of time to do what the church needs me to do as far as the healing and reconciliation process goes. So you get caught in that kind of bind. I would love to be working part-time and using the other part-time to engage the church in the whole issue of what it means. Here at Winnipeg Inner, working with Indigenous people living in deep poverty, we had to focus. We had, there's so many things that we could do, but we had to focus. And so focused on developing a congregation because there was a strong worship and ceremony component. What's been exciting for me is that although I am a minister of the Presbyterian Church in Canada and part of the Presbytery of Winnipeg, because there's so few Indigenous congregations in our denomination, I've been allowed a lot of leeway. And so we're developing our congregation in a way that works for Indigenous people within the Presbyterian Church in Canada. And we're doing it ourselves. There's no template. And becoming, I hope, the template for how the church deals with it, with establishing Indigenous congregations. The big thing within the Presbyterian Church in Canada, and I think it's probably in any of the churches, is how do you fund a poor congregation? Because our congregation lives in deep poverty, and they cannot produce the kind of funds that's necessary to be a congregation and to do what they want to do. So we're tagged into Winnipeg Inner City Missions. We're not separating mission from ministry, and that helps us because then the executive director position of Winnipeg Inner City Missions also then becomes the person who helps find those funds outside the church. It's this little maze that you just have to keep walking through, trusting that Holy Spirit, Great Spirit, Creator, will provide us with the direction and leadership that we require as we make our way in this new adventure within the church.
That's great. Thank you.
The amalgamation of the two missions, like that happened in 2004. That was huge. I mean, to get the two missions, both Presbyterian, different sides of the railroad tracks in Winnipeg, and that puts us in different gang territories and different everything else. We had two boards and two different kinds of ministries, and we were competing for all of the same resources as far as the Presbyterian Church in Canada goes, and also the resources in the community. And so bringing that together, I think, was the best thing that happened. So now we have one executive director for whatever the Presbyterians are doing in Winnipeg as far as mission goes in the inner city. And so, it is great. So that amalgamating was the first step to help get us moving in a direction.
Good. Thank you, Margaret.
That we're presently working in.
Sorry. Before we have our time comes to a close, I'd like to make space for us to each check out, and I'd invite you to kind of very briefly. We only have about 3 minutes before our time is kind of done, so to speak. So I'd invite you to share what has been the gift of this conversation for you. What are you taking away? That's gift or surprise or something that's kind of really going to stick with you from our conversation today. So Hannah, I'll go to you first.
I guess something that surprises me in this work is the lack of funders want to provide money for programs that are established. I think Christine was touching on this with what she was saying about seed money and the requirements of qualifying for that. A lot of times people they want to give money for new programs, for startup programs, but they don't want to provide money for places that are just being there for people on a daily basis and meeting them where they are. And it's inspiring to hear that you just kept going and that it was, worthwhile in the end to just keep pushing forward. But a lot of times it can be really discouraging when, all of the money out there for programs like this want to just keep creating new programs instead of funding the ones that are already there. So it's been great to hear about the different work happening in Ontario and in Winnipeg, and just as an inspiration to keep going, because it is hard work, and there's a lot of times it does feel like there's a lack of support, but there's obviously a lot of people with like-minded visions out there, so just to keep going.
Great, thank you. Tim, what about for you? What are you going to take away from this call?
Well, and it's funny actually, because I actually never really talked about at all the project that we are funded from Embrace in the Spirit about. Everything we talked about was completely internal. It is a little different. What I learned, and what I've known, I've been in the sector and worked in this area for many years, and it's challenging for funders to look at is where do you invest in things, and grassroots, smaller projects, are important and necessary. But then you look at our project, which we were funded for, which is what we're calling a faith hub, which is a partnership between the Cathedral Church of the Anglican Cathedral, the Catholic Cathedral, the Sisters of St. Joseph, who built all the hospitals here, like the Catholic hospitals in Toronto, the housing, and a whole bunch of things. Basically, the four main faith groups that come in together to work together at supporting our community, our vulnerable community in downtown Toronto, and that's what we've been funded. That's what the funding is supporting. And it's true. The amount of money we got from Embracing the Spirit is very little in comparison to what all the partners are bringing in. But it's important for a national body to invest in something like that with this kind of leadership, especially in a city like Toronto, because with these groups coming together, it's gonna have an impact in the community, which is going to raise the profile of faith community having a very strong role in our city. And that is really important, because down the road, it means in a few more years that the smaller congregations like Christine's and the rest of it will benefit from that increased profile. So it's a bit of a, how do you support, how do they choose to support or what not to support? And I don't certainly envy them, but this particular faith hub has been in the development for almost 2 years, and we're just now launching a pilot project together. And and we're really excited to see what will happen. And but our goal is really, and it's very clear, this is a faith hub. This is Christian faith congregation denominations coming together and to continue that mantle of leadership to take ministry to the next level and to support our community. And we're hoping that increased profile will help, like I said, the smaller congregations outside.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Tim. And you're right. We never actually got to that. We got all caught up in something else. So thanks for just kind of flagging our attention to that project as well, which also sounds amazing. So thanks for that. Christine, for you, what are you going to take away, and what's been kind of the gift or the learning or the thing you're valuing from our time together?
It was just so great to meet you all and to hear about what you're doing. It's so inspiring, especially being in a small, sort of more isolated congregation. And it's so inspiring to hear. And Tim, I just want to respond. I'm so glad that these big things are happening, because I do think that that is a really important piece of the sustainability of these important projects. And I think that, it's a time of chaos and uncertainty, especially in the United Church right now. And I know that the reaction is often to go and shore up the big churches so that they can survive through whatever's about to come. And I understand that, and I certainly support that. But the problem is, in 2 or 3 or 5 years, when you've got these resources to share, we'll be dead. Right? Like the small congregations like mine are dying. Some of them should. Right? Some of them should, and release the resources back into the community. Absolutely. But what about congregations that are in all sorts of isolated areas? And what I've found is that there's isolated areas of urban centers that they can't go to the big churches. They can't access the resources at the big churches. And not only that, but it's the small churches that are hearing. I'm not saying you're not hearing what's going on in the grassroots, but it's the small churches where some voices feel comfortable and, don't have the courage to speak in larger venues about what's going on. So I just wish it was a both and. I really wish it was a both and. Maybe we could, there could be more practical partnering between small churches and large churches, right now. I think that would benefit both types of congregations. But so I applaud all of that and I support it. But I grieve that those congregations and community organizations that are, one financial term away from closing, are being lost. They're always lost, but they're being lost right now because of this momentous fear that we're not going to survive as a denomination.
Wow, my goodness. There's important things getting said here today, and I'm not sure what to do about it.
No one knows what to do about it. That's the problem.
Apparently, and I feel like
questions.
I feel like a complete newbie because my faith history and my denominational history, I'm fairly new to the United Church of Canada. So I've only been a member of Hillhurst for the last maybe 4 years. So, and before that I was not a member. So I feel like, wow, this is all like news to me. So anyway, Margaret, what's been the gift for you from this conversation?
I think just hearing that everybody's struggling with the same kind of thing when it comes to resources for working with people that are in need in the community that we're sitting in. And also to hear about the struggle of smaller ministries within the larger church who's struggling at the moment to know whether it's surviving or not. All of those things are the same things that I'm dealing with here. And it's good to hear. It's not good to hear that other small places are struggling, but it's good to hear that other people like me and getting connected in a way like this. It becomes more, I'm not so alone in the struggle and the challenges that we have as a mission within the Presbyterian Church in Canada and a small congregation within the Presbyterian Church in Canada, and both mission and congregation being poorly resourced, financial resources, human resources, and sometimes it just gets overwhelming and you wonder, what are you doing here? And then I look at the faces of the people who we actually serve. And I've been here long enough to have kids that I've baptized graduating out of grade 12. And it's the first time in the history of their family for 4 generations that somebody's been able to get through grade 12. And so I know that what we're focusing on, like education is the key. Early education is really important. Encouraging people who are in those middle years to kind of rethink where they're heading in their life and what they want for career, and watching them succeed. It's like one at a time. I know we're doing a good thing, and I know that we've got something happening here at Winnipeg University Missions. And again, I'm doing too much. Like I can't do the marketing, I can't do the communications, I can't do the fundraising, and I can't do the church work all at the same time and do it well. So I'm not exactly sure what we're going to do about that, but we are doing something about it. Our board of directors is excellent at the moment. We've hired a consultant to help us with a move forward to like this separation between the executive director and the ministry position within the mission and ministry. I think that will give us time to focus on people and also focus more on getting our story out there. You know, like, because when people get gripped by the story, when they can see where their dollar is going and what it's doing, then we have more.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this has been great.
Well, thank you, all of you, very much for your participation, and it's felt very rich to me. And I'm glad for each of your roles that you're playing in the work that you're doing. Looks like you're bringing wonderful gifts and commitment and passion to it all. So thank you for that. And yeah, please, if you have time, fill out the survey and take a look at the rest of the conversations that are coming up. Feel free to join us for more and share the opportunity with your networks as you may be aware that there are people that you know that would value kind of some of the conversations that are coming up. We would love to have them join us. And we'll be making a recording of this available to people as well if you'd like to share it. So thank you very much. It's been a slice, so we can kind of wait to say goodbye.
Bye.
And,
blessings to you all.
See you again soon. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.